Hi, today's objective is to go through and try to understand how to pass the ICC Commercial Building Inspector. That's labeled as exam B2. The Commercial Building Inspector is fairly common amongst inspectors in commercial areas. There's three standards that apply to this particular test. One is the International Building Code, one is ACI 318, and the other is a concrete manual. Those are the reference standards published at iccsafe.org. I took building plans examiner probably 6 or 7 years ago. I took commercial building inspector about 9 months ago. I've taken both of those at different times. In this case, commercial building inspector, I want to focus on that because the three references that ICC prescribed, I only actually needed 2. I didn't bother bringing the concrete manual. It also spec'd out 318 2019. I used the 2014 edition. That's what I used when I did the building plans examiner 7 years ago. I had no problem with it. It was all the same information. It hasn't changed much. I think when I took BPE, Building Plans Examiner, 7 years ago, that was in the 2015 IBC. This is the 2021 IBC. So even though it was 9 months ago, I chose the 2021 rather than the 2024. There's very little difference between 2021 and 2024. So I don't have a test curriculum developed for the commercial building inspector, but I thought it'd be really practical just to run through my notes like I've done on other ICC exams I've taken. And I've had some positive feedback. Please leave feedback if you think it's worth your time, worth my time to share this with you. There's 2 reasons I'm doing this. One's to help you, but the other, it's kind of good to go through my notes and look at my highlights simply to review so it's fresh on my mind. Haven't looked at this for about 9 months. I'm the fire code official, HJ, for a nuclear waste and research reservation that's sponsored by the Department of Defense and Department of Energy. Mainly focused on the fire side, not the building, but I'm a master code professional, so kind of have a feel for everything. So it's kind of good practice just to go through this now and then. It might help you out. So with that, let's go ahead and roll into this really quick. Let me show you how the codes are highlighted and give some directions on how to pass that exam. So starting with Chapter 1, I want to run through this. There's actual questions that they're going to be on just about every test. One is, what's the purpose of the code? It's to establish the minimum requirements. So when you're an AHJ, otherwise taking the test, go from the perspective that the codes are designed as a minimum. There are certain situations, such as I mentioned before, as the AHJ for a nuclear site, I am more conservative in some places just because of the nature of what I'm dealing with. Also, general requirements versus specific requirements. Specific requirements shall be applicable. Always the case. It's a common question. The code official has no authority to waive requirements. The state legislature that adopts the ICC standards, they have that authority, but it's not delegated at the municipal level, the HJ level. Common question asked. So I'm not going to read all this, but what I recommend is take a look at my notes, take a look at, I highlighted B for building inspector, commercial building inspector. You'll see FC here and there. I used the same 2021 for the fire codes and standards for certified fire marshal. So FC was a question that I saw associated with the fire codes and standards. B is what I saw with commercial building inspector and also received feedback from others. So this is kind of a conglomeration of different inputs to give you some help at passing this test. So I'm going to try to go through this fast. If I see something that stands out, it might be worthwhile going. This is something you'll always be asked. These are situations exempt for permits. So you'll be asked, you'll be given a list of stuff that asks, well, what do you need a permit for? And they'll give you like a fence at 7 feet 1, driveways, movable fixtures. The limit's 7 feet for a fence. If you're above 7 feet, you have to have a permit. And technically, the other thing that comes up, I don't think it's highlighted here, is 120 square feet. That's the limit for like an accessory structure via the commercial code. Residential is 200 feet, 200 square feet. That will come up. So you don't have to have a permit if you're building a 120 square foot shed, for instance. you'll be asked, this is more of an FC question, but you will be asked on building occasionally, what do you need in the application for a permit? You have to have the street address. Expiration, this comes up a lot. It's 180 days is the magic number. So your permit expires if you've not worked it within 180 days, and you can always get an 180-day extension as specified there. That will come up. Okay. So what this is actually a question off the test. What do approved construction documents have to have? The answer was reviewed for code compliance. That's stamped on the set of plans you're using at your site, the job site. Okay. And once again, like I said, fire codes and standards, but it'd be worthwhile to highlight this as well. The ICC basically has a superset, and they kind of just merge all these questions together when they publish their tests. So sometimes you might be seeing both. So don't get thrown by that. I'd actually highlight both. Okay, so certificate of occupancy, you're going to have, you have to have the design occupant load. We'll talk about that when we get to chapter 10, but don't get thrown off on that. It's just something that you have to have. You have to have the design occupant load of the structure, and that can vary a lot depending on how you interpret that. But temporary occupancy, yeah, so you can have a temporary occupancy permit, TCO, but you have to itemize. So sometimes you have a building, you can't do a certificate of occupancy because there's things that are missing, like let's say suppression's missing or an alarm system's missing. But you're allowed to take occupancy in certain situations as long as you have compensatory actions associated with it. Like in the case of an absence of suppression, minimize combustibles, fire patrols, that kind of thing. Okay, so revocation of the permit, just read through that. I got to go a little faster here, so I'm not going to put so much time into this. Stop work order, Board of Appeals, penalties. The CO can't just arbitrarily prescribe penalties. They have to be prescribed by the municipality or law. Definitions, always in Chapter 2. Just when you get a question saying, well, let's say accessible, what defines accessible, or which of these is accessible? And then it'll go through and give different definitions. So the easiest way in that case is always go to Chapter 2. You'll see inferences here and there throughout the code. Don't kill yourself looking for those. A lot of times they're right in Chapter 2. So you'd go and look up the definitions on the question. That's how you can answer it. So approved has a definition, meaning approved by the building official. Annular space, that was a question I had. The opening around a penetration, like a pipe or something. Control area has to do with hazmat storage and separation of by a 1 hour fire barrier. You'll read about that in Chapter 50 of the IFC and Chapter 7 of this section, this IBC. No common use. It comes into play. You'll see this term. It's italicized, but be aware, like when you're estimating in Section 907, when you're talking about fire alarm systems, well, where do you have to place strobes, for instance? And it's in common use areas. It's basically a room that you're going to be having, let's say, 2 or more people or have permanent occupancy type thing. Just know that definition will occasionally come up. I always get draft stop and fire stop confused. You can put fire stopping for the purpose of draft stop. Just know the definition, or highlight it, know where to go. There's 3 means of egress members. They're exit access, and exit discharge. Know what the 3 are. You will be asked about exit access, and exit discharge. Basically, exit access is like a cubicle to the exit door. The exit door does not have to lead outside. It could lead into an exit and stairway enclosure, that kind of thing. So there's some subtleties in terms of the definition there. Just be aware of that. F rating did pop up. Just look at 714.4.12. Time period through penetration fire stop systems. You just read it. But just be aware this is something that came up I saw in the test, or one of the tests. Fire door assembly is not just a fire door. Okay, I can't remember the nature of the question, but just lumber has to be graded by an approved agency. That's what it is. Habitable space. Keep in mind, habitable space is like not a hallway. So it has a very specific definition. Bathrooms, toilet rooms, closets, halls are not considered habitable spaces. It's really important to know that definition, because it comes up when it says that a habitable space have to have so much area and so much width. Well, that doesn't apply to non-habitable spaces, so you'll get confused in the code. High-rise buildings are more than 75 feet. Know that. That will pop up. Interlayment, it tells you, and just read through this. I'm not going to, just look at my highlights. Let's see here. This does come up. I want to, yeah, just look at the other stuff, but this is interesting. The question was, let's see, what is both decay resistant and termite resistant, and it's cedar is what it comes down to. So you have eastern red cedar would qualify for both. It's not oak. Oak is not decay resistant. I think that I saw that somewhere. So, okay, smoke barrier. Smoke barrier is different than a standard fire barrier or fire partition. So there's three different things. Chapter 7 will go through that, but just you probably need to know some of the definitions there. Just know where to go to look. And what I'm saying is, when you're asked a question about what rating does a smoke barrier have, or just go to the definitions and then go to chapter 7. So it's kind of, you just got to know both those chapters. Standpipes, you have class 1, class 2, or the mix at class 3. Just a lot of requirements for class 3. Standpipes. Yeah. Okay, veneer does not add strength to a building wall. If you're putting on a veneer of some sort, like a brick veneer or something. Wall load bearing, 100 pounds per linear foot. That was a question I had. I was looking actually in chapter 16. It's actually right here in the definitions. So load bearing wall have to be able to support more than 100 pounds per linear foot. That's where you'll find it right there. So keep in mind, a lot of people get confused by this. It's really important to know that if you have a conference room with like 49 people, it is not a Group A occupancy, it is a Group B occupancy, and therefore it does not need a sign stating occupant load. So that might come up as well. So just know this section. Chapter 3 goes through occupancy definitions, but like know that A2 is a restaurant. Know that, you have all these sections like commercial kitchens, training. I want to be clear, when it says training, that is not K through 12. And Group E is not a training necessarily. Group E is specifically K through 12. So they delineate this very, like you go to a college or community college or something, that's a Group B occupancy. It is not a Group E. So don't get thrown by that. As far as Group H, just be aware you have 5 H occupancies. One is like explosives, one's gases, one's dusts, or vapors, excuse me, one's vapors, one's dusts. And then you drop down to like, like toxic materials. And then you have like H5 would be semiconductor type thing. So it's just worthwhile to know, like if you have a question, well, explosive storage above the maximum allowable quantities permitted by Chapter 50 of the International Fire Code, what occupancy? It's H1. That's what it comes up to. That's how they define that. Okay, here's an actual question, straight up, right off of the test. Okay, so the question was, which of these are not a mercantile occupancy? Okay, so you had a motor fuel dispensing facility. Let's just go back one page and look. Mercantile, Group M. Okay, so you're like a market. So motor fuel dispensing, like a gas station, is a mercantile. Retail or wholesale stores, like a grocery store, mercantile. Sales room, mercantile. But an auto showroom is not a mercantile. So you got to look up each section and try to find that. Auto showroom is a B occupancy. So that's what you'd go look at. So that was the answer. It was not auto showroom. Let's see here. This may come up occasionally, not often. I usually am more conservative in the facilities I manage. I usually default to an S1 just for a little more conservatism, and it gives you more flexibility. But keep in mind, if you're doing a parking garage, it's a Group S2, but you can also have this as a Group U if it meets certain parameters. Benefit of Group U is you don't need suppression and a lot of other more expensive stuff. Private garages, there it is. You can do that as a Group U. In fact, let's just pause really quick. I want to point out something just for your awareness. Group U, what's interesting about Group U, everything in here needs suppression, needs fire extinguishers, stuff like that. Group U, you can get away with a lot of stuff. You don't even need, Section 906 doesn't even require Group U's to have fire extinguishers. So you can get away with a lot of stuff on a Group U. So sometimes if you're trying to maximize what you're doing, if you have like an electrical substation, call that a Group U. If you have like, it gives you some limits here: tanks, stables, sheds, retaining walls. But a lot of times what you'll find in industry is people will stretch this and use, like I said, a lot of times substations are Group U. A lot of times utility buildings that support larger structures are considered U2. So that's why you do it. You can get away with that. It's very common. Yeah, okay, Chapter 4 is worthwhile. When I did the Fire Inspector video, Fire Inspector 1 and 2 video, I talked a little bit about Chapter 4 of the IBC from the 2015 version. This is the 2021 version. There's some good stuff in here. So if you have like a mall, I'm in the mall section right now. Let me show you that. Covered mall and mall buildings. Back when malls used to be cool. So you have this kiosk in the middle of your walkway. 300 square feet's your max. That was a question. Minimum width for wall egress is 20 feet. No portion can be less than 10 feet in a mall. Exit passageways. Exit passageways have a very clear definition. It gets confusing sometimes, so let me explain that. In order to meet the exit access total distance travel requirements that I'll cover in Chapter 10, sometimes in a big mall, you have to have these side corridors that go out to an exit, an exit discharge. You can't have any penetrations into an exit passageway. It has a very specific definition. See how that's italicized? So that means it's defined in Chapter 2. But they don't do a very good job defining these things, so I want to explain this. Exit passageways have fire-rated construction, and once you're in the exit passageway, you're effectively in an exit. So you've crossed a fire-rated door into an exit passageway. So that's how they achieve the 250 feet exit access travel distance requirements. I think it's 250 or 300. I'll look in Chapter 3. But this is not necessarily a corridor. It has a very specific definition, so don't get thrown by it, because in suppressed B occupancies, for instance, you don't need rated construction. You do in exit passageways. There's a bunch of stuff like that. Okay, I'll keep on going here. Shaft enclosures. Shaft enclosures would be like, you think of an elevator, think of an exit enclosure, a stairway enclosure. Those are shaft enclosures. So they just use this general term. So if you're 3 stories or below, if you're 3 stories, if they're 2 stories, you don't need any protection. If they're 3 stories, you have to have 1 hour. If you're 4 or more, you have to have 2 hours. But there's some allowances for here. So you can reduce to 1 hour, or automatic sprinklers are installed within the shafts at the top, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through it. You read it. But there's some allowances. We'll get to Chapter 7. It'll talk more about that. Fire Command Center. Chapter 4 of the IFC talks about that. Chapter 911 as well. Equipment room. Okay, let's just talk really quick about the standby and emergency power. Standby is 60 seconds, emergency power is 10 seconds. They have very different definitions, and it's often not clear. You have to actually look kind of deep to understand that. But when you see emergency power, it means power switches on in 10 seconds. Standby power switches on in 60 seconds if you lose building power. So they have different requirements for standby versus emergency. Yeah, we'll get to Chapter 8 and talk about that. Right now, we're in unique occupancies, underground occupancies. Chapter 4 is just unique stuff that's above and beyond the code. This is across the board. I brought this up in previous videos. Thou shalt not place a sleeping room adjacent to a garage, a parking area, where you have penetrations like a door or a window. Thou shalt not do it. You're going to get asked that, I guarantee it. So just be aware of that. Now, carports you can do because it's open on 3 sides. Carports, by definition, are open on 3 sides. I think it's 3, 2 or 3, but I think it's 3 sides. But garages, you can't do it. So dwelling unit, let's see. A lot of people don't understand this. That you can actually get away with 1/2-inch gypsum for dwelling unit separation from a private garage. Everybody says, oh, you got to have 5/8 or 3/4, and just reference that. IRC says the same thing. If you're going to use a solid door that's not necessarily rated between a dwelling unit and a private garage, 1 3/8-inch solid wood. I want to get out of Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is just specialized, but I'll tell you, this is the key word. There's 2 ways to look at this. One is, in the question, they're going to say, well, how much area do you need on a wall for natural lighting? Okay, but they'll also say a question like this. They'll say, how much natural lighting do you need in a wall for motor vehicle-related occupancy? And that's your key word, okay? That says, well, don't go to the normal interior environment chapter. Do that, but also go to section 406. That's what that means. So if they're specific in terms of something funky, a unique type of occupancy, that's your cue to say, hey, go to Chapter 4. (13.6) comes up all the time. That's the fire apparatus access clearance height. You'll see that a lot. Oops. Oh yeah, let's just talk really quick. So when you're in Chapter 10, we'll get there when you're in Chapter 10, but just be aware. So 407, if you look, is a group I2. I2 is a hospital, okay? So keep that in mind. Hospital, right there. That's hospital. You'll be asked a question about, let's say, distance of travel. I mean, their classic example right there. Exit access travel distance or whatever it might be. So you go to Chapter 10, look at the means of egress section for total exit access travel distance or common path of travel. But because they say I2, you got to go to Chapter 4, because Chapter 4, Section 407, has all sorts of stuff in I2. I3 would be hospital, same thing, or excuse me, I3 is a prison, same thing. You're going to come to Section I3. Stages, a lot of stuff on stages. This will cue you in. I don't think there's a lot of stuff different. These numbers are unique, though. They'll pop up. When do you need emergency ventilation for a stage? A lot of stuff will be in Chapter 7, though. But yeah, just if it says stage, come to section, this section here, 410. Get some information on that. Special amusement areas. I mentioned this on another video. This always comes up. Always comes up. I don't know what it is. So if you're in a amusement park, like one of those funky mirror rooms, you always have to have exit signs, no matter what you are. The rule says within 100 feet of within a corridor, let's be specific, you have to see a sign within 100 feet. Not an aisle. maybe I'll talk about that when we get to chapter 10, but there's some nuance there. What I'm getting at, though, is here you can put the exit sign within 8 inches of the floor, above the walking surface. So I've been asked this multiple times on multiple tests. I don't know why. It's just an easy question they ask, and maybe it tests whether or not you know where chapter 4 is. I don't know what the deal is. But just keep that in mind, okay? So here, I just forgot to mention objective. Go through this video with your IFC or IBC. Highlight the sections I highlighted. Underline the words that I highlighted. If you do that, these are the questions that'll pop up in your test. You're much more likely, I mean, all the other stuff, it's possible, but I've been through a lot of tests over the years, 18 different ICC exams. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've also talked to a lot of stuff, and I've copied other people's highlights and notes, okay? So I've seen what they've seen. I do a lot of training for my, my Department of Defense, Department of Energy site. So I had the chance to talk to a lot of people. So I'm just conveying that knowledge to you. If you do highlight the stuff, you're going to get 90% of the questions. At least 80%. Let's say 80%. What's passing? 75%, something like that. So if you just highlight what I have, you'll actually come out ahead. So that's the objective. Highlight what I've done and you'll be okay. Okay, control area, hazardous materials. There's other sections that go through. There's like 3 different sections that talk about fire rating for hazardous materials. This is going to be one. I think it's valuable to know, just know that H5s are semiconductor plants. You're going to see more questions on H5s. So just be aware of that. It will come up. Simply because of the U.S.'s efforts to expand that, you're probably going to see more focus on that. Isn't that interesting? Dead ends shall not be greater than 4 feet versus 25 feet or 50 feet in other places. So H occupancies, there's a classic example where you're much, much stricter in terms of like dead ends and other stuff. Okay, building height and feet above grade. I guarantee you're going to be asked this. There's some formulas that help modify it, but they'll use words like normal, or they won't give you like perimeters or any of the allowances. So typically you're going to be pulling right from here. Let's see here. R3. Yeah, just, yeah, it would take me a long time to explain this. If you struggle with this at all, I just watch some YouTube videos on just how to interpret this. I've not developed anybody, but I know there's some ways to do it. But for the most part, it's going to be these numbers that they're going to be pulling. So it really is not a big deal. Mezzanines, keep in mind, overall area. So when you're looking at area, this chapter talks about areas too, area factors. Mezzanine does not apply to the area, but what it does apply to is fire area. So, so just keep that in mind. The other thing is head clearance in a mezzanine is 7 feet instead of 7.6. Everywhere else for normally occupied areas is 7.6. Mezzanine is 7 feet. That's something to take away from that section. I can't remember the exact questions, but you have an R3, and number of stories was for a type 2A. And I think it might be worthwhile. It's just really a non-sprinkler type 2A. There are a couple things I want to point out. You'll ask yourself, well, why is there a non-sprinkler allowance in the code when everything except Group U requires suppression? Okay, well, No, excuse me, I'm lying to you. Group B doesn't ever require suppression unless you're over like 500 people. Same thing with F1, F2, S1, S2. I should say R's, R1, R2, R3, R4 always require suppression, okay? Well, why do you have this non-NS? NS means, if you look down here, you can see the definitions. Buildings not equipped throughout with an automatic suppression system, okay? Well, if R's, and you go to section 903, I'll show this to you, R's always require suppression, okay? Well, why do you allow no suppression? Well, that's because most municipalities modify this. Most municipalities globally, United States, domestically, whatever, their legislation, when they adopt the ICC code set, says, well, apply this code except that R3s don't need suppression. Okay, so that's why you have the option. It's very common. I could tell you some stories why it's in the code. It's kind of ridiculous. It's corporate money at work. It's really maddening. But in any event, what the question I think was, you have type 2A, what is the maximum number of stories, and it's 4. That's what it comes down to. I don't want to waste any more of your time on that. So this is the formula for calculating area. But I think the questions I saw was like, it used these numbers. It didn't actually use this. So it wasn't, I don't think I had to calculate the allowable area based on perimeter allowances and stuff like that. So it made it a little easier just to look up in the table. Could be wrong. Just know this formula and how it applies. But it was easier than you might think. It just came right off of here. Allowable area factors. Oh, and something else, aggregate, like if you have a type 5B, which is it's the most common construction. So your house would be a type 5B. It's a combustible construction without any fire rating. If you're looking like at an R2 would be like an apartment building. Let's look at R3, which would be your house, not suppressed. Let's say it's unlimited in size. That came up. If it's an R2 apartment complex, type 5B, you're allowed 7,000 square feet. I'm not going to go through that. No sense to belabor that anymore. Okay, accessory structures. 10% is a magic number. You'll see 10% all over the place, whether it's NFPA 13 or otherwise. It's a very common number to use. So let me see, what did I need here? I'm trying to think. So the hour was the answer was 1 hour. I don't remember. Okay, there it is. Footnote, magic footnote right there. The required separation from areas used only for private or pleasure vehicles shall be reduced by 1 hour, but not less than 1 hour. So that was the answer. I think originally it gave me 2 hours. Yeah, see right there. It said, there it is. Let's go through this process. I have a residential occupancy, and it's a business occupancy, and required separation of occupancies. So let's say I have a multi-use, multi-occupancy structure. I need 2 hours of separation between a B and a R. So it's normally 2 hours. So let's say I had there's a lot of nuances here. I don't want to get into this and go too crazy, but let's say I had a business with like a residence in the back. I would have to have 2 hours unless it is like separation of private and pleasure vehicles. It's 1 hour type thing. So anyway, whatever it came out to be, it was 1 hour when I traced it out. So point is, always look at these footnotes. You see the footnotes indicated. Make sure to look at the footnotes. Otherwise, it'll catch you. Okay, incidental uses. It's definitely something you need to know. This section, this table, you will be asked something from this table. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. I don't know. I could just read my highlights. I'm not going to read them to you. You can figure it out. Just know that they're there. Okay, over to 3. Table 601, fire resistance requirements. Trying to think. I had a question on this. Interior type 3A, 1 hour rating. That was the answer. and these are bearing walls. So non-bearing walls, you don't need anything. The reality is, for your protection, it's not a big deal. Heavy timber. Yeah, so here's a question here. What was it? Roofs. So type 2. Okay, so type 2 is it's non-combustible construction, okay? But non-combustible construction is not strict. Let's take a look. So I have footnotes B and C. The question was, in a roof, can I use wood? And look, it's right there. Heavy timber shall be allowed for roof construction in a non-combustible building. Okay, so there's a few allowances like that you can use. There's a couple different ones as well. Okay, Chapter 7's big. It has a lot of stuff on it. I mean, the things I've underlined with the B are something that are beneficial to commercial building inspector. So it's just something you should look at specifically. I mean, everything you should look at, but more attention on the ones I've labeled with B. This is a really important section. Let me explain how this works. 705.5, it changed from the 2018 to the 2021 version. In 2018, it used to be Table 602 in Chapter 6. They moved this to Chapter 7. But there's a lot of confusion on this chapter, and it's really important to understand how to read this. So let's look at like a Type 2B in a group, let's say a Group F occupancy, Group F1. So let's say, actually, well, Group 1A. Just trying to think of the best way to explain this. The point is you got to double these numbers is what I'm getting at. So commonly, others would be let's say Type 2B. Type 2B is probably, in commercial, is the most popular used. It's non-combustible, and there's no fire-rated protection. So think of your Home Depots. That's a Type 2B. The reality is, for others, so I want to find something that's, I want to use this down here. This is a common scenario you should be aware of. So if you are greater than, let's just say 10 feet away. 10 feet away, yeah, so actually I prefer this one. Let's just, I mean, I could go through this, but there's a lot of variabilities here. What I want to emphasize is you're more than 10 feet away. You got to double these numbers on this size. So 60 feet's a magic number. 20 feet's a magic number. If you are 20 feet away from another structure, you need no exterior fire rating on your, what do you call it, exterior walls. So I don't want to go through and take the time to have to read all this, but what it comes out to be is it's 20 feet's the magic number. That's when you transition. This 10 feet, that's to a lot line. It is not to a building. It's to a lot line. And the lot line separates buildings on a typical lot. So the actual distance from building to building is 20 feet. So that's the takeaway from this chapter. So they'll ask, let's say two buildings are, how far do two buildings have to be away? Two Type 2B buildings have to be away so the exterior walls do not have to be fire rated. And the answer would be 20 feet because you got to double that. It's that kind of thing. Just be aware of that. It's a tricky table, and a lot of people make mistakes on that table. So parapet wall, for firewalls, they're going to be a little bit different. And you have a parapet wall definition that applies to firewalls. But just be aware there's some definitions here on parapet walls that you probably should be aware of. Let's see, what was 705.8? Let's bear with me. 705, exterior walls, yeah. So exterior walls, you look at a building and they have these funky walls on the roof. Those are parapet walls. You will be asked a bunch of stuff from here. 18 inches flashing, non-combustible, 30 inches total height as a minimum. Stuff like that, they'll actually ask you. So just know, when it says parapet, go to 705.11. Yeah, just highlight the stuff I have there. I can't take the time to read it. There's a lot of stuff. So you go from firewalls to fire barriers. Fire barriers are most common. They don't have the parapet wall requirement. They don't have the independence for, if one side of the building collapses, they don't have independence. But for construction, fire barriers are most common. Then you have fire partitions. They just have different definitions for, fire rating is always 1 hour, not less than 1 hour for fire partitions. And then you have smoke barrier. It has to be 1 hour for fire rating. Let me explain 1 hour, what that means. It's based on ASTM E 119. It's the furnace test. I want to be very clear, 1, 2, 3, 4 hour. It does not correspond to real life survivability. This was developed back, I never can remember, 1918. What the heck was his name? It's on the tip of my tongue, but 10 years after the guy that developed this in the early 1900s, he says, look, we had to come up with something. And what it is just basically a furnace that uses like natural gas, and it ramps up the heat in it over time, and then you're measuring how fast temperature moves through a product, or there's a bunch of rules. But the problem with the furnace test is it doesn't reflect natural conditions for fire. When you have a sooty environment is going to behave much worse than the vapors from natural gas. So these numbers don't correspond to real life survivability. They correspond more to like it's just an apples to apples type of comparison for the sake of rating materials, not in real life. So don't think that if I have a 1 hour rating, I'm going to survive for 1 hour. That's not the case. That's what I'm trying to explain here. So shaft enclosures, I meant before in Chapter 4 we talked about shaft enclosures and high rises. So Chapter 7 will talk about shaft enclosures. There's some other sections in Chapter 10 about shaft enclosures as well. Penetrations through fire-rated construction have to have specific requirements. Know that. But like I said, a lot of the stuff you don't need to know. If you just do the highlighted stuff, it'll save you tons of time. Let's see, fire door hardware. This is always important. Latch required. You're going to guarantee you'll be asked about that. Guaranteed, 100%. There's also, be aware, there's a difference between a smoke damper and a fire damper. They serve different purposes. I can't remember the question. It was something like, I honestly don't remember, but the answer, it was like, which of these can be in a smoke barrier, something like that. And the answer was, well, a fire damper wasn't required. I just don't remember what the question was, but it's something along those lines. Just keep in mind that there's a difference between those two, fire damper and smoke damper. Fire blocking materials. Look for this. Look for joints. So some of this you could use, like for fire blocking, you can use something fairly thin, but you have to have a backing on it. And that's a kind, like in other words, what do you have? One thickness of 0.719 inch, wood structural panels, plywood, but it has to be back. See, the joint has to be back. That's what they'll get you on right there. So just be aware of that. And I think the answer was not 1/2 inch particle board. I think that was the answer to the question. So they asked, what's permissible for fire blocking? And the answer was, which of these is not permissible for fire blocking? And the answer was 1/2 inch particle board, because it's not in this list. Note the 1,000 square feet for draft stopping. Know what you can use for draft stopping materials. You can use 3/8 inch wood panels. And 3,000 square feet for an attic is kind of a magic number. Draft stopping in attics, every 3,000 square feet you have to be draft stopped, unless you're equipped with a suppression system. Except in rare cases, the smoke developed index is always going to be 450. But you'll have 25, 75, and 200 for your flame spread index. ASTM E84. I'll explain that when we get to Chapter 8. See, there's 25 again and 450. It's always 450. So why do I say that? There's a couple exceptions where 450 is not applicable, and it has to do, where did I see that? I just don't remember. I think it had to do with plastic insulation. I don't remember if it's Chapter 26 or not, but the point is there's only one really oddball place where 450 is not used. Otherwise, it's always 450. So what they'll ask you is, like, which of these materials, this material has to have X flame spread index and X smoke development index. And they'll give like 250 or 300 or 600 or whatever. And you have to pick two of them. It's 25 and 600. Well, that's not the answer. It's 25 and 200. That's not the answer. It's 75 and 450. Well, there's the answer. So just be aware of that. It's always 450 in those kind of questions. 1.5. Just, I don't know. Note this is an important table. 721.1 parenthesis 1 is important. It's telling you what the fire rating is for various surfacing materials and construction materials. I guarantee you're going to be asked something out of table 721.1 parenthesis 1. So, like, let me give you an example. So this is a little bit different. Parenthesis 2 is different than parenthesis 1. These are various walls and partitions. So let's say you have a question. You have concrete masonry units, CMUs. They're made out of limestone cinders, air-cooled slag, blah, 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 blah. They're 2 hours. How thick does it have to be? 4 inches. There it is. That's how you'd solve it. So what the question would say something like this. You have a wall made out of concrete masonry units, limestone cinders. They're 4 inches thick. What's the rating? And the number is 2 hours. That's how you'd look that up. It gives you, so it's going to tell you the nail. I think I had to look up the nailing for the gypsum, type X 5/8 gypsum. What is the nail center to center spacing? So just look up that. And then, so this is for fire rating. They have other places for like gypsum that's going to give a different number. But keep in mind, if it's designated for fire rating, go to Chapter 7. That's where you're going to find it. As far as your fastener periodicity, you got to go to Chapter 7, as well as the other chapter, which we'll get to. Okay, we'll talk about this when we open up ACI 318, but concrete cover over reinforcing steel. It gives you some tables. Just be aware. So cover thickness for pre-stressed concrete floor, 3/4. just kind of remember 3/4 inch. There's some variation there. I'll talk about that when we get to ACI 318, but for the most part, it's 3/4. You're not going to go wrong at 3/4 most of the time. In other words, if they're asking how much concrete cover do I need over reinforcing rebar, if you don't know, just pick 3/4 inch. You know, don't know what else I can say. Okay. Yeah, there's some perimeter formulas for calculating fire resistance in here. I don't think I saw any of them though on the test, so I wouldn't worry about it. Just it's too specific. I could be wrong, but I really don't think I saw anything on any of the, whether it's building plans examiner or commercial building inspector. I don't think they go into that level of detail. But just know this is here is what it comes down to. Just know that the formulas, highlight the formulas I've put in, might help you. But I don't think you'll need these for the tests. Okay, let's jump through Chapter 8. Interior finish, keep in mind, like the Station nightclub in Warwick, Rhode Island, killed 100 people. What was that, 2002? That was because it violated interior finish. They had that acoustical polyurethane foam on there, ignited, and the fire spread instantly. What you're allowed interior finish-wise is Class A, Class B, Class C, and it has these definitions. And let me explain how this works for ASTM E84. It's the Steiner tunnel test, and what they have is this tunnel, and then they fasten the material on the roof of this tunnel. It's this tunnel. I don't know how wide it is. 20 feet, 20 inches. I mean, it's like 20 feet long, something like that. I'm ballparking. I can't remember exactly what the dimensions were. But they have windows. And what you do is you basically see after a certain duration of time how far the fire has gone under a certain velocity of wind. And like concrete 0, red oak is like 100. And that's what they used as the 2 points to make a scale. So gypsum would be, you know, Class A. So your sheetrock's Class A, 0 to 25. You know, I can't even... Class B, I don't know what that is. I can't think off the top of my head. But Class C would be like plywood. So if you're asked, well, can I do a residential building without gypsum? The answer is yes, you can, as long as it meets the flame spread index. I don't know why you couldn't do it. I've had people say, oh, it's the end of the world because you have like tongue and groove pine as an exterior. And there are some requirements for covering insulation, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, particularly plastic insulation. But for the most part, there's no reason you can't have wood on the interior of a structure. Unless it's a non-combustible structure, then there's other requirements there. So this just tells you a bunch of stuff. Let's take a B occupancy. So the interior exit stairways. I have to have a Class B interior finish. But let's see, if I go down here... Yep, so Class B interior, yep, see, so I can get away with Class C in many cases here if I'm suppressed. So you look at these tables and then look at the footnote references, and then you can come down here and you can actually derate it. And in some cases, you could completely eliminate the requirements. You can go with the Class C is what I'm saying. You can't go above a Class C. You can't go above a 200 flame spread index for interior finish. For occupiable structures, period. You're not allowed to. Let's just talk really quick about, before we move on, there's allowances in here. I don't want to look them up, but like a Group E occupancy, a K-12, like a high school or something. As far as placement of paper, like kids in the kindergarten are going to draw some pictures for, you know, mom and dad, whatever, on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, and then they put it on the wall. Technically, there's some limitations on that. That would not be that's above a Class C. That technically is illegal if you covered the whole wall with that kind of interior finish, but there's allowances for that kind of stuff within a certain area limitation. So just keep that in mind. That Class C rating is an upper maximum. Doesn't apply across the board. There's some allowances for it. Let's just run through Chapter 9 really quick. Fire protection features. Da, 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 da. So let's jump to 9. So I never saw any questions on fire pump and riser room sizing, but 903 is the suppression system. You're going to get lots of questions on it, and it'll be like questions. Just look here. You go from group A. This is alphabetical by occupancy type, right? So there's A4, A5, roof occupancies. Group B. If you look at this right here, ambulatory care facilities. There's some other sections here I referenced, but the point is Group B really doesn't have, you don't have to suppress, period. Now there's a requirement, I included 211.3. Let me just come over here, 211.3. So there's a special building areas. You need to know this. So you went sequentially, Group M, Group R, Group S. Like if I had more than 12,000 square feet in a Group S, a storage occupancy, I'm required to have suppression. But what I'm saying is look at this section. It skips Group B, business occupancies, like office space. It doesn't require suppression, but look over here, specific building and hazards, other than Group U. So Group U never needs suppression. This is where you're going to have, in a Group B occupancy, it's going to call out you do need suppression in certain Group B occupancies, okay, more than 55 feet, or if they have a basement location with a certain occupancy number or something like that. So just keep in mind when you're asked the question to look at section 903.2.11 for those exemptions. Otherwise, they'll get you. Like here, stages. Let's say a stage was in a B occupancy, it was under 50 people, you would have to have suppression there. Let's say that. It'd be kind of weird to have a stage in a B occupancy, but it's feasible. You can get away with 13D suppression, but it causes the area allowances to change. So everything's based on NFPA 13, not NFPA 13D, which is domestic. So just keep that in mind. Look at the footnotes and definitions carefully, because your area increases and interior finish decreases are based on NFPA 13, not NFPA 13D for your suppression system. More stage stuff, class 3, standpipe. So this is the standpipe section here, 905. Just be aware that stages, depending on how big they are, need a standpipe. The other thing, the magic number to keep in mind is 30 feet. If your floor level is above 30 feet over the level of exit discharge, the fire department vehicle access level, then you have to have a standpipe. And that is included for buildings under construction. Keep that in mind. So you got to do something. 30 feet is kind of a trigger magic number. Yeah, there it is. Shall be provided 3311. You'd have to go back and look at 33. Or we'll go forward at some point. We'll get to 3311. Not in this seminar, but in a subsequent one. All right, crit system circuits Group A. So we're at 907 now. Keep this in mind. There's two kind of fire alarms. There's manual, which you have those pulls, right? And then they sound, signaling devices go off throughout the building, notifying personnel to evacuate. So that's one type of a fire alarm system. The other type is an automatic system. So an automatic system would be like smoke detectors tied into a fire alarm system. I want to be clear, that is not the same thing as the standalone fire alarm systems in a house. Okay, I'm talking about something totally different. A fire alarm system that has individual smoke detectors. And they can all be tied together. If you sense smoke anywhere, then all the signaling devices, the strobes and the alarms go off throughout the structure. So this just tells you where you need it. You don't even need any kind of a fire alarm system, any of them, if you have less than 500 people in a B occupancy. So B occupancies and U occupancies both are fairly flexible. B does require them, but you're allowed to have a lot of people. Group A, you don't need a fire alarm system unless you have more than 300 people. Magic number, 5 feet. If you're required to have a manual fire alarm system in a structure, the manual fire alarms have to be within 5 feet of all your exit doors. So just keep that in mind. And that, I want to be very clear, that would include not just going outside exit door. Keep in mind the definition of exit is, it's if you're going into like what's called a horizontal exit or an exit passageway or an exit stairway enclosure that's protected by like 1 or 2 or 3 hour rated construction, you've entered into a protected area. So that is considered an exit. So as you go into those locations, you also have to have your manual fire alarm pull station within 5 feet. So just keep that in mind. This comes up a lot. 110 dBA is the maximum that you can have for the pressure, for the sound. That will probably get asked. A fire plans examiner certainly asks that. Keep in mind the differences between public use and common use. In terms of where, so visible alarms, where do you put them? It's very confusing. Public use areas and common use areas, so right here, shall have visible alarms, and there's some exceptions. Well, what does that mean? Basically, what it means is if you have an office area with more than one person in it, so like 2 cubicles in an office area or more, you're going to have a visible alarm as well as an audible alarm. Just keep that in mind. And this talks about like ADA for like, our R1 would be like a hotel, okay? So a certain percentage you have to have visible alarms in hotels. Can't be above 22,500 per zoned. The smoke control section here, just kind of look through it. Let's see here. Doors show, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. This was a question I highlighted. I can't remember. This was one of those questions saying which of these is not correct regarding smoke control systems. Let's see here. Just bear with me. I want to make sure what section was it? 912. Detection and control systems, yeah. I just don't remember what the wrong answer was. So automatic control for smoke controls, appropriately zoned automatic sprinkler system. Anyway, these are the answer. These are the correct ones in that list, and they give one that was not here. So just keep in mind, this is an actual question, automatic control, detection and control system for smoke control systems. So just know, I don't know how to tell you, just highlight it and thumb through during the test, see if you can find it. I did get some questions on, a question on like the lights for your smoke control system. So just kind of be aware that's there. What colors mean different stuff. I just can't remember at this point, what the question said. It's been too long. I mean, 9 months ago I took this. Okay, access. It's more of the same. Just look through my highlights. Smoke and heat removal. Fire Command Center. So there's some specifics in terms of size. 200 square feet comes up, and then there's another minimum dimension that comes up occasionally. It's 10 feet. Okay, the minimum dimension of, yeah, so keep in mind it's a 200, so like high rises require fire command centers, okay? So chapter 4, the high rise section, it says you need a fire command center. Well, where do you go? You go to section 911. This gives you the parameters. So what it'll say is you have a high-rise building. What's the minimum area of your fire command center? The minimum area is 200 square feet. But they might also ask you what the minimum width is, and they'll give you some different dimensions. There's this formula here you could follow. It seems like I've seen that somewhere on one of the tests I took years ago. Okay, I'm going to stop there this time. I'll come back. We'll revisit Chapter 10, move forward. I want to keep these not terribly long, but I hope you get the gist. Just go through, highlight those things, look at the stuff that we talked about in this video. It'll help you get through it. This book's big. I still have to go through this and ACI 318, so I'll probably have 4 different parts for the Commercial Building Inspector. Anyway, appreciate your time. Hope you got something valuable about this off this video. What I'd appreciate, I just want to know if it's worth my time. So in the notes, if you could just say, yeah, this is good, or Russ, you didn't give me anything I could use. Or give me some ideas on how to improve if you want to see some ways to improve. I just happen to think this is the best way to learn it. You just can't read the code. You just cannot read the code and expect to learn it. It just won't work. You have to have specifics. And I did take a prep course on this. I've talked to a lot of people that have taken this, and my notes actually from the test too kind of combined to give you, I think, hopefully a passing grade on this if you just know the sections I highlight. Anyway, appreciate your time. You have a good one. Catch you later.